Hello and welcome to the RE Religion and Life revision video. This is theme B on the AQA syllabus and it comes in the paper 2 paper, which is the themes paper. There are just a few admin points that we need to go through before we get started. The first one is that if you see a pen like this one here on the slide and a piece of paper behind it, then that means that I want you to be writing on a piece of paper. So make sure that you've got a piece of paper and a pen in your hand in front of you as you're watching the video. The second is if you see the pause symbol, I'm expecting you to be able to pause the video to give you a little bit more thinking time or to give you time to be able to answer a question or something along those lines. And finally, if you see a symbol like this, then it means that you've got a specific amount of time to be able to practice an exam question. Try to keep yourself to the exact amount of time so that it's giving you the most realistic practice for your exam. To start with, we're just going to go through some keyword definitions. All I want you to do, please, on your piece of paper is to write down the key word or key phrase that goes with each of the definitions that I read out. Number 1. A scientific theory that explains how animals have adapted over time to live and survive in their environment. It uses this idea to explain how humans also have come into existence. Number 2. Deliberate termination of a fetus in the womb. Number 3. The idea that humans have the right to do as they please with the planet as it was created for them. Number 4. A mercy killing, ending a life for someone who is terminally ill by helping them to die. Number 5. Using live animals to test potentially dangerous products on them before they're used by humans. It can also be used to test scientific theories and medicines. Number 6. A person who chooses not to eat meat. Number 7. A person who chooses not to eat meat or use any animal products, including eggs, milk, and leather. Number 8. Things released into the environment that are toxic and cause damage. Number 9. A scientific theory about how the universe began. Number 10. The idea that humans have responsibility to care for the earth on behalf of God. Number 11. The idea that life is sacred and special because it was created by God. Number 12. The idea that human life is valuable and should be protected. Number 13. The idea that the universe was created by God. Number 14. A measure of how good or bad a person's life is. Number 15. The state of having a duty to deal with something. Number 16. A place of pain and torture where you go if you have been bad in life. Number 17. The idea that the world carries a value and should be cared for. Number 18. Things that humans use that are produced naturally, for example, coal, oil, and gas. Number 19. The end of life, when the body and brain cease to function. Number 20. The sense of amazement we feel when looking at the natural world, for example, the feeling you get when looking at a waterfall or a beautiful sunset. Grab a green pen or a different coloured pen to the one that you've just been writing in. Mark yourself as we go through these. Make sure that you're getting them right and correcting them as we go through. I'll be testing you on them as we go through the video. The first one, the scientific theory that explains how animals have adapted over time to live and survive in their environment, uses this idea to explain how humans have come into existence. That is the theory of evolution, or just evolution. The deliberate termination of a fetus in the womb is abortion. The idea that humans have the right to do as they please with the planet as it was created for them is the idea of dominion. We are given dominion over the earth. A mercy killing, the ending of a life for someone who is terminally ill by helping them to die, is euthanasia. Using live animals to test potentially dangerous products on them before they're used by humans can be used to test scientific theories and medicines is animal experimentation. A person who chooses not to eat meat is a vegetarian. A person who chooses not to eat meat or use any animal products, including eggs, milk and leather, is a vegan. Things released into the environment that are toxic and cause damage is pollution. Scientific theory about how the universe began is the Big Bang. The idea that humans have a responsibility to care for the earth on behalf of God is stewardship. The idea that life is sacred and special because it was created by God is the sanctity of life. The idea that human life is valuable and should be protected is the value of human life. The idea that the universe was created by God is creation. A measure of how good or bad a person's life is the quality of life. The state of having a duty to deal with something is responsibility. A place of pain and torture where you go if you've been bad in life is hell. The idea that the world carries value and should be cared for is value of the world. Things that humans use that are produced naturally are natural resources. The end of life, when the brain and body cease to function, is death. And the sense of amazement we feel when looking at the natural world, for example, the feeling you get when you're looking at a waterfall or a beautiful sunset, is awe and wonder. Make sure you're looking back at these definitions and keywords all the way through because they give you access to exam questions. 1 and 2 mark exam questions as well are really reliant on you knowing the definitions of these keywords, so make sure there's something that are really easy for you to be able to come back to. First, we're going to look at one of our key rules. This one is the idea that Christians and Muslims believe in the sanctity of life. This means that life is sacred and special because God created it. It means that it should always be protected and looked after. The key here is the idea that God has created life. That is the thing that makes it sacred and special. And that gives Christians and Muslims the idea that you should always look after it under any circumstances. It is always special, regardless of the situation that it's in. So what I want to know is, how will this belief affect a Christian and Muslim's attitude towards abortion? Think about the definition that we gave for abortion previously and try to use the sentence starter that you've got on the screen there to be able to start off. So a Christian or a Muslim will think that abortion is right or wrong because. Pause the video now and write an answer to that question using the sanctity of life. The first topic that we need to look at are the origins of the universe. Now we need to look at this in terms of religious views in the origins of the universe and the scientific views of them. When we talk about origins of the universe, we're talking about where the universe came from, what ideas there are about why the universe exists and why we're here. So we'll start off with looking at the religious views of these. As we talk through them, I just want you to write down 5 bullet points underneath the title, The Genesis Creation Story, that tell you what happens within the Genesis creation story and what this religious view is. So the first book in the Bible is Genesis, and the first thing that deals with is the creation story. The first part, Genesis 1, is about how the world was created out of nothing by God. And it goes through 7 days of creation. So on day 1, God creates light, day and night. God says, let there be light, and light appears. We've used this as a quotation before to show the omnipotence of God, the fact that God can speak things into existence. Day 2, God creates the sky and separates it from the water below. And day 3, he creates land and sea, plants and trees. Day 4, God creates the sun, the moon and the stars. Day 5, God creates the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. Day 6, God creates animals to live on the earth, and finally, he creates Adam and Eve, the first 2 people. On day 7, it says that God rested, and in the Bible it says, God looked at everything he made, and he was very pleased. He says that the 7th day of the week should be a special day of rest, and that's why Christians and Jewish people use the 7th day of the week as a day of rest and a day of worship. In a second, I want you to pause the video in order to answer that question in red at the bottom of the screen. How might belief in the creation story affect how a Christian treats the planet? Think about the fact that it's God who's created it, that it seems to be intentional on the part of God, and the fact that at the end of the week, God looks at everything he's made and is very pleased. Pause the video now and answer that question at the bottom. The scientific view of how the universe was created is very different to the religious one, but it's something which you need to know about for your exam. Again, as I go through the Big Bang Theory, I just want you to write down 5 bullet points that would give you a little bit of a summary as to how scientists might see the world as being created. The Big Bang Theory is a scientific theory that scientists use to explain the beginnings of the universe. 20 billion years ago there was nothing. An explosion created a cloud of dust and gas. Over millions of years, this dust and gas formed stars and planets and eventually the universe we know today. The Earth was very hot when it first formed, and it was covered in a mixture of liquids, chemicals, minerals, proteins, and amino acids called primordial soup. This eventually gave rise to the first forms of life. Evidence for this theory is in the fact that the universe is still expanding. This means that if you go back in time far enough, there must be a single small point that it is expanding from. Scientists believe this is why there must have been a Big Bang to create the universe. What I'd like to know is why somebody might support scientific views on the origins of the universe. Think about what evidence scientists might look at and why people might believe this over the religious idea of creation. Pause the video now and write an answer on your piece of paper. Often, scientific views and religious views are put at odds with each other in terms of the way that the universe was created. For many people, they are mutually exclusive. You can only believe one at a time. And this leads to lots of conflict between science and religion. What we're going to look at now is whether people should believe that scientific stories about creation are correct or whether religious views should be seen as being correct. And there are reasons for each side of the argument depending on who you are. What I want you to think about are the religious views and teachings that we've just looked at, as well as scientific examples that would prove that scientific theories about creation are correct, or that religious theories about creation are correct. Pause the video now and try to give 3 bullet points for each side of the argument. Here are some of the answers that you could have got in your table. We'll start off with looking at scientific theories about the creation of the universe and see where we might be able to look for evidence to be able to prove that they're correct. The first bullet point that we've got there is the idea that evidence for the Big Bang is that the universe has been observed by science to still be expanding. This means that if you go back in time, there must be a single point that it's expanding from. The evidence is pretty convincing that the universe continues to expand, and it makes complete sense that if you reverse time, that expansion would be contracting. Therefore, the universe must be starting from an infinitely small point, and the only explanation as to how that has expanded is from the Big Bang. The second point that we've got for this is science is more evidence-based and therefore has proof for its findings. However, religion is based on faith. There is no proof that God exists. No one has seen God and can prove that he made the world in 6 days. Science relies on evidence in order to take findings forward. Religion relies mainly on faith in order to make people believe what they believe. If we have evidence and specific things to point at to be able to say that scientific explanations for things are true, it makes complete sense to believe them. If we have nothing but the word of the Bible, prophets and other holy books, in order to be able to say that religious ideas about the origins of the universe are correct, then people may well question them. Finally, religious people differ about how the world was made. The Bible talks about what God made on each day and said that he rested on the 7th day. Muslims don't mention anything like this and believe that God doesn't rest as he has no need for it. Which one is true? This suggests that maybe all of it is lies. If there was one explanation that religions could give, then they should all settle on the same one. And the fact that nobody settles on what the creation of the universe looks like suggests that it can't be right. This must mean that scientific views are the true ones. On the other side of the argument, we could say that religious creation stories are correct. The first point that we could give is that religious stories about the origins of life come from the holy books. The holy books say that God made the world. These are the word of God, so they must be true. For example, in the Quran it says, "It is we who have revealed it, it is we who shall protect it." This means that not only is the Quran God's words, it also means that it's protected by God from being changed. Everything in it must be reliable and true. If you have faith in that holy book, then obviously everything that it says within it is true. So the religious stories about creation must also be true. The second point that we could give is the fact that God is omnipotent or all-powerful. Only a powerful being like God could make the world. In the Bible it says nothing is impossible with God. There are also quotations in the Quran like he is the all-knowing, all-seeing, able to do anything, which suggests that God is all-powerful. The fact that Christians and Muslims believe in this all-powerful, able to do anything God means that there's no reason why they shouldn't believe that religious creation stories are not true. Finally, we could suggest that religious creation stories are still correct if we look at it in a different way. God may have made the world through the Big Bang, so religion is not false at all. God could be the thing behind all the science that we look at. It could be the case that Satan is trying to take people to hell with him by making them think that the Big Bang happened on his own. He's poisoning people's minds so that they don't believe in God, just like he tempted Adam and Eve to sin. It doesn't always have to be the case that science is seen to be at odds with religion. Why can't it be the case that God isn't behind the scientific explanations that people give in order to explain the origins of the universe? If we go back to our previous point, the idea that God is omnipotent, it seems completely feasible that an all-powerful God could come up with a really elegant way to create the whole of the universe. Science seems to be that elegant way. It's time for our first keywords test. I want you on your piece of paper to write down the definition of the word evolution. Evolution is the scientific theory that explains how animals have adapted over time to live and survive in their environment. It tries to explain how human life has come into existence as well. Having looked at how the world was created, we now need to look at the way that we treat the world. Abuse of the planet basically means the way that we're damaging the environment. And we've got 3 different things that we're doing that are damaging the environment at the moment. As I go through them, I just want you to write down 3 bullet points to be able to explain ways in which humans are damaging the environment. The first of them is pollution. Anything which is toxic and causes damage to the environment is classed as pollution. It can be caused by many things, including cars that cause air pollution. We can also refer to things like litter as pollution, toxic waste, oil spills, factory emissions. All sorts of things are classed as pollution. Anything going into the environment which is toxic, which damages it. The second thing that we need to think about are carbon emissions. These are released when any fossil fuels are burnt. For example, cars and other vehicles use petrol, which gives off carbon emissions. The effect of carbon emissions is global warming. Because carbon emissions are greenhouse gases, they contribute to the greenhouse effect and make the Earth a warmer place due to the insulating effect that that has. The final thing that we need to think about in terms of abuse of the planet is the use of natural resources. People use natural resources all the time, and any materials that we use that come from nature are classed as natural resources. These could be wood, water, oil and gas, and we are overusing these resources. This is particularly problematic with non-renewable resources. Things like coal and oil are not things that are going to be replaced easily. They take millions of years to form. And therefore, if we keep on overusing them, we will run out of them and not be able to maintain the lifestyle that we've got. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to think about the problems that each one of those things causes in terms of abusing the planet and a solution to each one of them as well. What could we do to fix it? I'm going to get you to pause the video, and as we go through, I want you to be writing down a problem caused by, for example, pollution, and a potential solution to the problem that you give. Pause the video now and give yourself as much time as you need to do the same thing for all 3. Pollution, carbon emissions, and the use of natural resources. These are the sort of answers you could have had. Using a different coloured pen, add to anything that you might have missed, and any new points that you want to add on as well, then put them down in your notes. The first problem that we'll look at is pollution. And the problems that pollution cause could be 2 things. The first one is air pollution. It can cause people to become ill with asthma and other breathing difficulties. This is not a kind thing to do, obviously. Jesus said, love your neighbour. It could end up killing people, and it certainly causes people lots of difficulties in their life. The second thing that we can talk about is the pollution of rivers, lakes and the sea means that wildlife like fish die. This could go against the teaching of stewardship. We could extrapolate this in terms of talking about pollution with other environments as well. Animals on land don't deal with toxic materials within their environment very well either. And any time that we're killing animals, then we can say that we're going against the idea of stewardship, the idea that God has created the planet and we've got a responsibility to look after it and everything on it on behalf of him. So what are the solutions to this pollution? Well, one solution is that we can recycle so that less waste is produced. If we're recycling all of our waste, that it's not going to landfill, it's not producing toxic chemicals, and the world is going to be a cleaner place. We could also ensure that the law is changed so that companies stop using things that cause harm to the environment. We've seen an example of that recently in terms of plastic bags being charged 5p in order to be used. This has led to a reduction in the number of plastic bags being used, and then obviously a reduction in the number of plastic bags that go to landfill. The second thing that I asked you to look at was carbon emissions. Now, the problems caused by carbon emissions could be that they're greenhouse gases, and this increases the greenhouse effect leading to global warming. If there are more greenhouse gases in the environment, the Earth is better insulated, and more of the heat from the sun stays on the planet. Global warming is bad as it leads to flooding, droughts, and hurricanes. All of this can damage human life, going against the sanctity of life. It can also, of course, damage animal life, which goes against stewardship. The solution to this could be that we could encourage the use of greener energy, like wind or solar power, as they don't produce carbon emissions like burning oil, gas, coal would do. We can also look at forms of transport which produce greenhouse gases and think about how we could reduce them. Electric cars are becoming more and more popular, and one of the reasons for that is that they don't have any emissions. Of course, we've got to think about where we're getting our electricity from in the first place, but a reduction in the number of cars that use petrol would be a good thing for the environment. Finally, if we think about the use of natural resources, the problem is that we're using them up too quickly for future generations, so they won't have enough left. We might end up having a world that can't support the modern technology and transport methods that previous generations have developed. This doesn't seem very fair to future generations, nor is it a particularly loving thing to do. So we could say that it goes against teachings like love your neighbour, treat others the way that you want to be treated, or Allah is compassionate. The possible solution that we could give to this is that we could replace the non-renewable natural resources that we use with renewable ones. The more that we can use renewable resources, the more likely it is that future generations will have the things that we have. So for example, we could replace coal and oil with solar and wind energy. Using the ideas that we've just looked at all about the world and the way that we're abusing the planet, I want you to write down as many things that you can think of as to why the world should be valued and why the world should not be valued. If we're talking about the world being valued, we're talking about reasons that we would see the world as being important. If we're saying that it shouldn't be valued, we could be talking about the fact that the world isn't important, or we could be talking about the fact that we ought to value other things above the planet, like ourselves. Really, the two things that you're looking for on either side of this argument are stewardship on the idea that the world should be valued and dominion on the other side. Look back through the video and through your notes, pause the video and see what you can get on both sides. Use the table on the screen to try and add any more ideas that you might not have had. The idea that the world should be valued could be the fact that it contains beautiful things that fill us with amazement. For example, waterfalls, the look of the sky at sunset, and other things like that. We have a responsibility to look after them so that we can continue to see them. This is the idea of awe and wonder. Christians believe that they have a responsibility to look after the world. They believe in stewardship, which means looking after the planet on behalf of God. It will be disrespectful not to look after it, and therefore we should see it as being of value. Finally, God took a lot of time to create the world, showing that it's special. After God made it, in the Bible it says, God looked at everything that he had made and was very pleased. This means that God is proud of the world he has made, so we should care for it and value it. On the other side of the argument, we could say that Christians believe that they have dominion over the earth. In the Bible it says, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. This means that we have power and control over creation and we can do as we please. We don't need to care for the world or see it as being of value. We could also say that the world is a temporary existence. It should not be valued, but the afterlife should be. Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that this life in this world is as a traveller. This means that we should not settle in this world, but see it as a journey to the next. It shows that the world is unimportant, as we only have a short stay here and an eternal one in the afterlife. Finally, God is the one that is all-powerful. The Bible says nothing is impossible with God. This means that he will ensure that the world is looked after so we can survive on it. We don't need to value it and worry about it because God is there to do that for us. It's time to look at another one of our key rules. This one is the idea of stewardship. This is a Christian belief, and it's the idea that humans have a responsibility to take care of the earth on behalf of God. It is disrespectful to damage the world that God made them. The easiest way to think about this is that the world is a gift given by God. If we're disrespectful to that gift, it's like being disrespectful to God, and so we need to make sure that we're taking care of it. What I would like to know is how this affects a Christian's attitude to the use and abuse of natural resources. You can start off this answer by saying this teaching encourages a Christian not to overuse and abuse natural resources because. Pause the video now to give your answer. The next thing that we need to think about is how we use and abuse animals. The first thing that I want you to do is to make a spider diagram in your notes talking about how we might use animals. These might be for good things, they might be the things that you see as bad. Any way that we use animals as humans is what I want to see. Brainstorm at least 5 ideas on your piece of paper. Pause the video now in order to give you time to do that. Here are some of the answers that you could have got. Add any answers that you haven't written down and try to give an explanation for each one. So the first thing that we could talk about is that animals are used for food. For example, we eat the meat of things like chickens, of lambs, of pigs, of cows. We also use their products. So we eat eggs, we eat cheese, and we use milk from cows. Another way that animals are used is through animal experimentation. Sometimes animals are tested on to test new drugs, medical procedures, and cosmetics. This is largely down to the fact that we don't want to harm people, and so we are happy harming animals if it means that people's lives are saved, or that they're not harmed. Another way we could use animals is for products like clothing. We use leather from cow skins, we use wool from sheep's wool. Animals are used for companionship in terms of pets. Lots of people enjoy having pets around them in their house. Many people see pets as being absolutely essential parts of their lives. And finally, we use animals for work. Horses on farms, police dogs, guide dogs, all these different animals are used in order to work for us, to do our job for us, which makes our lives easier. So there's lots of ways in which we might use animals. Pause the video again and just write down underneath each way that you've given whether you think that that is an acceptable use of animals and why you would say that that is acceptable or not. It doesn't matter if you think that it's good or bad, you just need to be able to give a reason why. It's time to think about another one of our key teachings for this topic. This one is the fact that Christians believe that in the Bible, St. Paul says, submit to those in authority. This means that Christians are told to follow the law of the society they live in, as they believe that God has put them in charge, so that person should be obeyed. I want you to think about how this might affect a Christian's attitude towards abortion. If you're not sure what abortion is, look back to the key words that we did at the beginning of the lesson and try to remember what the definition for that was. So, underneath that question, just write down, it will make a Christian think that abortion is good or bad because. Finish the question now, pausing the video in order to do so. One of the ways that we talked about animals being used was animal experimentation. On the screen you can see various different views on animal experimentation that might give us an idea as to what religious people are going to think about it. On your piece of paper, I want you to make a table like the one in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. On one side, I'd like to know why people would allow animal experimentation. On the other side, I'd like to know why people do not allow animal experimentation. Simplify what I'm saying so that you're just giving bullet points, but try to make sure that you're giving religious teachings where you can to support your view. The first view is this. I believe that we should use animals in experiments because they help us to make new breakthroughs and discoveries in science. Animal experiments save human lives. The Quran says, if you save one life, it's as if you've saved the whole of mankind. Think about which side it should go on and write a bullet point to explain it. The second view is, I believe that we should use animals in experiments as we are more important than animals. It doesn't matter if they suffer because they don't have feelings like we do. The Bible says, God created man in his own image, which means that humans resemble God and are special, not animals. No harm is done in testing on them. The next view is, I believe in dominion, having power and control over the earth. In the Bible it says, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air. This means that I can do whatever I please on the earth, so I can test on animals if I want to. The next view says, animals belong to God as he made them, so they should be cared for, not cruelly tested on. The Bible teaches the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. This means that everything belongs to God, so needs to be looked after, as it's not our property to use however we feel like. Finally, Christians believe in stewardship. God puts it in charge of the world and looking after everything there is on it. This includes animals. By doing animal experiments that often kill and cause harm to animals, we are intentionally harming something that God has asked us to look after. The two key arguments that I want you to focus on here are this one and this one. Whenever we're talking about animals or the way that we treat the planet, we should go first to these two teachings. The idea of dominion, having control over the earth and being able to do what we want with it, and stewardship, the idea that God's created the planet and we've got responsibilities to look after it. If you go off those two teachings, you'll always be able to get arguments on each side of whatever you're asked about in terms of animal experimentation or the planet. As well as animal experimentation, we need to know about vegetarians. Vegetarians are people who choose not to eat meat. Vegans are people who choose not to use any animal products whatsoever. So as well as not eating meat, they might not wear leather products or use any products that have animal derivatives in them. The reasons why people might choose to be vegetarians or why they might choose to eat meat are various. On your piece of paper, write down 4 bullet points. 2 reasons why people might choose to eat meat and 2 reasons why people might choose to be vegetarians. There are various reasons why people might choose to be vegetarians, and here are some ideas that you might want to get down. Being a vegetarian would free up lots of land, so it could become forest. More trees taking in carbon dioxide would reduce global warming, protecting the planet from extreme weather like droughts, flooding and hurricanes. We've already looked at the negative effects of global warming and why that is a bad thing. Farming animals takes away lots of trees and is a huge cause of deforestation. If the demand for meat dropped, it would mean there was lots more land that was left to be forests, and that would be a good thing for the planet. Another reason why a person might choose to be a vegetarian is that they may not like the way that animals are treated before they're killed. Some are not killed in a kind way either. They believe it goes against stewardship, the duty to look after the earth, including plants, animals, on behalf of God. The welfare of animals is something which is very important to some people. And we can see in many products that they try to take into account the fact that people really do care about how animals are treated. If more people buy free-range products because they think that animals have had a happy life before they're killed, then that's something the producers may listen to. Finally, it could be because of a religious belief. For example, many Sikhs are vegetarians as they believe in the value of all of God's creations. They think that killing them for meat would not be a very good thing. As well as these reasons, we could look at slightly more simple reasons as well as to why people might be vegetarians. People simply not liking meat could be one reason why you choose to be a vegetarian, or people having a love of animals and not liking the fact that animals are killed in order for them to live. On the other side of the argument, we've got lots of reasons why people choose to eat meat as well. They might believe that we've been given the world by God and we can use it however we like. Remember this idea of being given dominion over the planet. In the Bible it says, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. The idea that we are more important than the rest of the planet, and the fact that we can use it however we like, justifies us killing animals in order to eat them. Another thing that we might say is that it's part of the religious festival for Muslims to sacrifice an animal and eat and share the meat. At Eid al-Adha, to remember when Prophet Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son Ishmael to please God, Muslims will sacrifice an animal and share the meat with others. If this is an instruction from God and something that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did, then it's something that Muslims are going to do, and it's going to mean that Muslims are going to eat meat. Another reason why people might choose to eat meat is God allows the use of meat. In Judaism and Islam, God gives rules on how it should be killed. God wouldn't give rules on how it should be killed if he didn't think that it was okay, and therefore Jewish people and Muslims conclude that it must be an okay thing to do. Another reason why people might choose to eat meat is that it seems to follow the natural order of things. Lots of animals in nature eat meat, and we are predators, therefore we are designed and evolved to be able to eat meat. Alongside this, people argue that they like the taste of meat, and that meat provides lots of jobs for people around the world. A huge number of jobs around the world are reliant on the idea of the meat market being available for people to be employed. Think about the farmers, the restaurant owners, and others who are all involved in the production of meat. Within the idea of whether we should experiment on animals and the idea of whether we should use animals for meat, we come round to this idea of whether animals have rights. In its most basic form, if we can conclude that animals have rights, then we don't really have the right to take away their life in order to eat them or in order to experiment on them. If we can conclude that animals don't have rights or have fewer rights than we do, then many people would say that we can actually use them for those purposes. As I go through these different things, I want you to try and give me 3 bullet points on each side to say either yes, animals have rights, or no, animals don't have rights. So let's look at the reasons why people might believe that animals have rights first of all. Christians believe that animals are part of God's creation, and so humans have a duty as stewards to protect animals. Stewards are people who protect the planet on behalf of God, as he created it with so much effort. Remember, stewardship is a really, really important teaching for this topic, and something which you really need to remember. Those who misuse animals will answer to Allah. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, all creatures are like a family of God. This means that every creation, including animals, is important, so it should be cared for. It suggests that animals have the right to be cared for and treated well. Finally, Christians believe that the world belongs to God, so we need to look after his belongings. In the Bible it says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. We can link this quotation with the idea of stewardship. Because the world belongs to God, we have a responsibility to look after it. That means that animals are our responsibility, and it means that we should afford them rights. On the other side of the argument, we can also say that animals don't have rights. We've already looked at the idea of stewardship, but on the other side of that argument, there's the idea of dominion. Christians believe that God created the world, including animals, but put people in charge of this. This is dominion. God tells people that they have been created to rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. Although this could still mean that animals do have some rights, it does mean that people have got more rights than animals, and therefore we can use them how we want. Another argument could be that humans are just more important than animals. It doesn't matter if animals suffer because they don't have feelings like we do. In the Bible it says God created man in his own image. This means that people resemble God and are special. It doesn't say the same about animals. We have got more right to be alive than animals do. Finally, animals don't have rights when it comes to animal experiments because it saves human lives. In the Quran it says if you save a life, it's like you've saved the whole of mankind. This shows that the reward and importance of even protecting one life is protecting everyone, so we are more important than animals. We're going to have a go at an exam question now. This is a 4-mark question, so you're going to be spending 4 minutes doing it. Because it's a 4-mark question, you need to be making sure that you're looking at PEE skills, so you're using contrasting views and using a point, evidence and explanation for each one. You must use religious views in your answer, and it's best to aim for 1 from Christianity and 1 from Islam. The question that we're going to be looking at is explain 2 contrasting beliefs about using animals for experiments. Remember, only give yourself 4 minutes to do this question. Pause the video now and answer the question as best you can. Okay, let's have a look at a model answer and see how you've done in comparison to this. Remember that we're using a PEE structure, so we need a clear point, some evidence, and an explanation for that evidence all the way through. We also need to make sure that all the way through we're answering the question. The question here is about animal experimentation and whether we should be using it or not. Remember as well that it asks you for contrasting religious beliefs about it. If the two beliefs that you've given are on the same side of animal experimentation, you're only going to be getting 2 marks. Let's have a look at this answer and see what we can say about it. So, Christians believe that using animals for experiments is bad because animal experimentation often kills and causes harm to animals. Christians believe in stewardship, which means that God put humans in charge of looking after the world and everything in it, including animals. This means that animal experimentation is bad, as it is not caring for them. However, Muslims think that using animals for experiments is good, as it helps to make new scientific discoveries. In the Quran it says, if you have saved one life, it is like you've saved all of mankind. This shows animal experimentation is good, because scientists can find medicines that save human life, which is very important. Within this question we can see that really clear PEE structure. It starts off with Christians believe and Muslims think. It shows us immediately what religion we're talking about within the question. And then a simple point is made in each one that's going to outline what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the paragraph. Then we can see that really clear reference to religious teaching in each paragraph. In the first one, we've just got a reference to a particular idea. In the second one, we've got a specific quotation. The final thing that you need to do is make sure that you're saying what it means and linking the idea back to animal experimentation each time. If you're not making it clear how this idea links to animal experimentation, then you're running the risk of not getting the marks because your point isn't clear enough. Time for another keywords test. Give a definition for abortion. An abortion is the deliberate termination of the fetus in the womb. We've already looked at the origins of the earth and the way that the universe was created, and we've looked at the scientific and religious views for that. What we need to do now is look at the scientific and religious views on the origins of life. This is the idea of how human life and other life has come into existence on the earth. For the religious view, I want you to write down 5 different bullet points entitled The Religious View on the Origins of Life. Again, we're going to focus on the Bible for this religious view because there's a very clear story in Genesis 2 which tells us about the creation of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are the first 2 people that God creates, and they're also the first 2 people to commit sin. This leads to them being punished, and all humans come from these 2. In the Bible it says that God takes soil from the ground and creates a man called Adam. In Genesis it says, the Lord God took some soil from the ground and formed a man out of it. God gives Adam instructions that he can live in paradise, the Garden of Eden, and can eat from whatever tree he chooses apart from a forbidden tree. God creates a woman out of one of Adam's ribs. This woman is called Eve. God creates her to be a companion for Adam. Satan tempts Eve to eat from the forbidden tree, and Eve takes a fruit from the tree, eats it, and encourages Adam to do the same. This is the first time that humans disobey God, and is known in Christianity as the original sin. They are sent out of paradise and have to go into the earth and make their own way. God tells them to live on earth and go forth and multiply, to have children. From these 2, Christians believe that the rest of mankind has come into existence. Once you've written your 5 bullet points, I want you to think about how belief in this story could affect a person's view on abortion. Think in particular about the quotation, go forth and multiply. Write an answer to that and pause the video to do so. The scientific view on the origins of life is very different to the religious one. The main theory accepted in science for the origins of life is the theory of evolution. Evolution is the word used to talk about the way that things change and adapt according to the environment that they're in. This happens over a very long period of time. The theory was put forward by a scientist called Charles Darwin, and he has stated that humans have come into existence from the process of evolution. The theory goes something like this. All life on Earth began with the same simple organisms. Natural mutations in the offspring of these organisms led to some being more able to survive in a particular environment than others. Those who survive more successfully will pass on their good features to their offspring. Those who don't survive obviously won't be able to pass on those features to their offspring. This will eventually, over thousands of years, lead to the development of new species perfectly adapted to survive in the environment they live. This makes a lot of sense. If you look at the picture on the left of 4 different finches, you can see how their beaks have adapted to eat different types of food depending on where they live. Obviously, if there are a lot of nuts around, a big strong beak to break the nuts would be more useful. Whereas if lots of things are berries or things that are stuck in pieces of wood, then a small sharp beak would be better adapted in order to get food. Those finches that are best adapted to be able to feed best are the most likely to survive and the most likely to pass on their genes to their young so that they have the same beak as them. Evidence for the theory of evolution comes from the fossil record, which shows that animals have changed over thousands of years. They have adapted to their environment. We can also look at life around us and similar species which have slight adaptations to make them better adapted to the environment they live in. Think about the differences between polar bears and grizzly bears because of the environment that they live in. Write a couple of sentences saying why somebody might support scientific views on the origins of life. What is there that suggests to them that this is the most likely reason for life on Earth to exist? Now that we've looked at both sides of the argument in terms of religious and scientific theories about the origins of life, we need to again look at which one we're most likely to accept. On your piece of paper, make a table like the one I've got on the screen. On one side, I want you to write down the evidence to say that scientific stories are correct. On the other side, the idea that religious stories about creation and the origins of life are correct. Try to use religious teachings and examples in order to back up the points on either side of the argument. Try to give 3 bullet points for each point of view. Pause the video and get as many as you can. Here are some of the ideas that you might have added to your table. Add to your table any ideas that you do not have. So first of all, let's look at the idea that scientific theories about creation and the origins of life are correct. The first thing to say is that there is clear evidence to support scientific theories like evolution. For example, the fossil records show that animals have changed over time to adapt to where they live, like finches have different shaped beaks depending on where they live and what they eat. Religion doesn't have any clear evidence, as a person can't see God and no one witnesses God creating Adam and Eve. Evidence is a massive advantage in terms of scientific theories. Scientific theories can't be put forward at all unless there's evidence for them, and this is an argument that religion doesn't have to back it up. Evolution also shows that life on Earth was created through a natural process, not by God. It means that there's no need to believe in God anymore. For many people, this is a really important thing. Lots of people have a problem with belief in God because of the problem of evil and various other arguments. The problem of evil is the idea that God shouldn't allow evil to exist in the world, as he should and would be able to stop it. Because there is evil, it suggests that there's no God. And if we've got explanations for things like how life on Earth exists without thinking about God, we have a neat way to remove God from the equation altogether and not have a problem with the existence of evil. On the other side of the argument, religious people may say that evolution is just a theory stated by a man, Charles Darwin. He's a human and humans make errors. They are imperfect, but God is perfect and powerful. The holy books are from God and are so without error. In the Quran it says, "It is we who have revealed it, and it is we who shall protect it." The Quran says also that God made Adam and Eve, and humans come from them. Alongside this, we have the fact that in science, theories are taken over and superseded by new ones all the time. What's to say that the theory of evolution is not one of those theories that's going to be taken over by something else when new evidence comes to light? The advantage of believing in religion is that the truths that come from religion are going to be true forever, whereas science is changeable when new evidence comes to light. Another argument in favour of religion is the fact that the creation story in Genesis 2 shows how God created Adam and Eve, and when they committed the original sin, he told them to go forth and multiply. That's how humans have come into existence. If this was not true, then why is it necessary for God to give Jesus in order to atone for the original sin? Remember, in the Bible it says, "For God so loved the world, he gave his only Son, so that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." And another quotation which shows it is, "Christ died for our sins." Humans today clearly sin, and that's because we all come from Adam and Eve, so it's within our nature to commit sin. Finally, it's possible to believe in evolution and God if you don't take the words of the Bible as literally true. The Bible says nothing is impossible with God, showing that he can do anything. If God is so powerful, he could well have used the process of evolution to create life. Although this doesn't disprove the scientific theory of evolution, it also shows how the religious story of the creation of the universe could still be true, with an all-powerful God who uses clever methods like evolution in order to achieve his aims. It's time for another one of our important teachings. This is an Islamic teaching, and it says that Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. This means that suffering is a test from Allah. Allah will not allow them to suffer any more than what they can handle. What I want you to do on your piece of paper is tell me how this belief will affect a Muslim's attitude towards euthanasia. Remember, from the key words that we looked at before, euthanasia means an easy death. It's taking somebody's life when they're terminally ill and suffering. Use a sentence starter. It will make a Muslim think that euthanasia is good or bad because. The next topic we need to look at is abortion. Now remember, when we were doing our key words tests, that abortion is a deliberate termination of the fetus in the womb. It's the word we use to refer to the deliberate ending of a pregnancy. One thing to bear in mind when we're looking at abortion is that abortion is legal in the UK. If it happens before 24 weeks and two doctors agree to a number of conditions, including the fact that the mother's life could be at risk, that the child may be born with severe mental or physical disabilities, that it could have a serious effect on the mother's mental or physical health, and that it could have a serious effect on the mental or physical health of existing children. If one of these conditions is fulfilled, then an abortion is allowed to take place in the UK. There are many reasons why a person may choose to have an abortion, and on the screen you can see a few of the reasons that a person may give for feeling like they needed to have an abortion. As I go through them, I want you to write down which one you think is the most valid reason to have an abortion, the best reason to have an abortion, and which one you think is the least valid reason to have an abortion. It may be that you think that any reason a woman gives to have an abortion is valid because it's the woman's body and therefore her right as to what she does with it. It may be that you think that abortion is always wrong and therefore none of the reasons are valid. If you think either of those things, then try to put that into your own words and write that down on your piece of paper. Here are some of the reasons then that a woman may say that she wants to have an abortion. The pregnancy may have been an accident. It's often the case that pregnancies are unplanned, and if they are unplanned, it may well be that a woman doesn't feel like she can bring up a child with the person who she's become pregnant with, or that it doesn't fit in with her plan at that moment. It may be that the parents may not feel that they can afford to bring up a child. This could have a massive effect on the quality of the child's life, and therefore be a reason to have an abortion. The child may be born with severe disabilities that affect the way it's able to live. Sometimes disabilities can be very painful for a child, and sometimes they can be very difficult to look after as well. Both of these factors could be factors in whether a woman chooses to have an abortion. She may not want the child to go through pain and difficulty in its life, reducing its quality of life, or she may not want to go through the difficulty of bringing up a disabled child. In either one of these cases, it can be a reason to have an abortion. Another reason could be that the mother's life is at risk if she continues with the pregnancy. There are many different factors that could come into this, but often if the mother may die if she continues with the pregnancy, that can be a reason to have an abortion. Another reason could be that the mother and father may no longer be in a relationship, and the mother may feel she's not able to cope alone. Obviously, lots of people are single parents, but not everybody feels that they have the strength to be able to do that. That could be another reason to have an abortion. Finally, a reason to have an abortion could be that the mother is too young to have a child. Many teenagers become pregnant when they're still at school, and it can have a real effect on their life chances and ability to go through education and make the most of their life. This can be a reason why lots of people choose to have abortions, as they just don't feel like they're ready to have a child. Pause the video and think about the most and least valid reason that we've given. If you can think of other reasons why people have abortions that you think are more valid or less valid, then write them down as well. In looking at the rights and wrongs of abortion, we come down to pro-life and pro-choice arguments. These are names given to the groups of people who believe that abortion is right and who believe that abortion is wrong. If you are pro-life, then it is being in favour of the life of the unborn fetus. It's saying that abortion is always wrong and the fetus's life should always be protected. If you are pro-choice, you're in favour of the choice of the mother. It's saying that the mother has a right to choose what happens to her own body and therefore should be able to have an abortion if she chooses. Write down pro-life and pro-choice as we go through these different arguments, and make sure you've got at least 3 arguments on each side. Try to include a religious teaching for each one. We'll start with pro-life arguments to say that abortion should never be allowed. The first one is very simple. One of the 10 Commandments is do not kill in Christianity. Abortion can be seen as taking a life, and therefore it would be wrong. In the Quran, it says if you've killed one person, it's as if you've killed the whole of mankind. Again, we have this idea of the fetus being a life, so it being a massive sin to end its life in the eyes of God. More specific than these two is a quotation from the Quran. In the Quran it says, "Do not kill your children for fear of want. Allah will provide for them and for you." This is saying that you should not kill your children because you think you will not be able to provide for them, as God will help you out. It's saying that regardless of why you want to have an abortion, it shouldn't happen because God will be the one to help you through it. Finally, we have the idea that every single life is valuable. Both the Quran and the Bible teach the sanctity of life, which means that life is special because God created it. No one has the right to end a life but God. This idea of the sanctity of life is really what all pro-life arguments hang on. The idea that the fetus is a life which is special and its life should not be taken away. This is directly at odds with the idea of the quality of life on the pro-choice side of the argument. If the quality of the life of the fetus, or the potential baby, or the mother or the father is going to be reduced, pro-choice campaigners would argue that abortion should be allowed to take place. The main pro-choice argument is the idea that a woman should have the right to decide what happens to her own body. If she doesn't want to go through the pain and stress of childbirth, she shouldn't have to, even if she's become pregnant. It's a very powerful argument as it leans on the idea that everybody has the autonomy to decide what happens to their body. Why should somebody be forced to do something that they don't want to do? Another argument is that in the Quran it says, "Do not kill unjustly." It could be argued that if there is a just or fair reason to end a life, like the mother's life being at risk, then abortion could be allowed by Muslims. Another argument is the idea that Jesus said, "Love your neighbour." This is a very powerful argument as it leans on the idea of the quality of life. It could be the most loving thing to have an abortion. For example, if the mother has been raped, or the parents cannot afford to keep a child, the quality of life of that person would be reduced by having the child, and it would not be a loving thing to do. The final argument is that the law allows abortion. In the UK, abortion is legal, and the Bible says submit to those in authority over you. This means that Christians in the UK should accept the fact that abortion is allowed because they believe that God has put the people in charge there and therefore they should be listened to. The next topic we need to look at is euthanasia and the law in the UK. Remember that euthanasia is defined as a good death. It's helping somebody who is terminally ill to die easily. Euthanasia and assisted suicide are illegal in Britain. The maximum jail term for helping someone to die is 14 years, and it can be viewed as either manslaughter or murder. Doctors in the UK do switch off life support machines and are allowed to give drugs that ease the pain of a patient even if they know that it would lead to their death. This is known as passive euthanasia. In other countries, however, like the Netherlands and Switzerland, euthanasia and assisted suicide are completely legal. People from the UK sometimes travel to these places in order to be helped to end their life. I want you on your piece of paper to write down whether you agree with the euthanasia law in the UK and a reason why. Use the sentence starter on the screen in order to help you. Pause the video until you've written your answer. It's time for another keywords test. Define the words, the value of human life. The value of human life is the idea that life is important and should be protected and respected at all times. The idea that life is intrinsically of value. You need to be able to give reasons that support and go against euthanasia. As I go through the next 2 slides, make sure that you're writing down as many reasons as you can that support euthanasia and as many reasons as you can that go against it. We'll start off with the reasons in favour of euthanasia, reasons why people should be allowed to be helped to die. If a person is suffering from a poor quality of life through the illness that they have, allowing them to die in a quick and relatively pain-free way is a kind and loving thing to do. This follows Jesus' teaching of love your neighbour. A person may be living a life in constant pain and want to put an end to it. They want to end their life to stop suffering. In the Quran it says, do not kill unjustly. It could be seen as a fair and just reason to end someone's life if it means that their suffering is put to an end. Another reason why people may agree with euthanasia is that they may feel that the care that they need in order to live is too much to expect others to be able to provide for them. They may see themselves as a burden to their family or carers. The golden rule is treat others the way that you would like to be treated. If you would not want to be a burden on others, then other people should have a decision not to be a burden as well. We could also use this teaching, treat others the way that you would like to be treated, to put yourself in the position of suffering that many terminally ill people are in. If you feel that you would want to end your life in that position, it's only fair to allow them to do the same thing. Finally, humans have the right to live, so why not allow them the right to die if that's what they want? It's not illegal to commit suicide, so why should it be illegal to help you to commit suicide if that's what you want? Especially if you're unable to commit suicide yourself. On the other side of the argument, we can look at reasons why euthanasia should not be allowed as well. We could see suffering as a test from Allah. If people choose to die rather than face that test, they will be judged poorly on the Day of Judgment. In the Quran it says, Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. That means that God is not going to give anything to you that you can't really cope with. And if you use euthanasia to escape that test, it makes you look weak. We could also say that it's killing someone which is clearly forbidden. Euthanasia always involves somebody else being involved in the death of a person. In the Bible, in the 10 Commandments, it says, do not kill. And in the Quran, it says, whoever kills a man, it's like he has killed all of mankind. Both of these quotations mean that killing is always wrong. Predestination, Qadr, is one of the 6 articles of faith in Islam. This is the idea that God has planned your life out for you. This includes the pain you go through and the time of your death. You should accept God's will and not interfere. In the Quran it says, only what God has decreed will happen to us. For many Muslims, this means that euthanasia is wrong, as you're going against God's plans. However, some may say that God's plans, if they're already written, must include euthanasia if that's the way that you die. Finally, we can look at the fact that all life has a value and an importance, even if the quality of life is poor. The Bible and the Quran both teach the sanctity of life. This means that life is sacred and special because God has made it, and it should be protected and respected at all times. Euthanizing a life is not respecting or protecting that person's life. We're going to do another exam question now, this time a 5-mark exam question, thinking about the arguments that we've just looked at for and against euthanasia. The question is, explain religious beliefs about euthanasia
refer to scripture and sacred writings in your answer. In this, you must give religious views and at least one clear quotation. Again, you're going to be writing 2 different reasons, and you're going to be using PEE skills in order to do this. So you're going to give a point, some evidence, and an explanation. In this case, the evidence needs to be a clear quotation. You've got 5 minutes to do this, so pause the video now, give yourself 5 minutes. Let's have a look at a model answer and see how you did in comparison to this. Christians think that euthanasia is bad because it is killing someone. In the Bible, in the 10 Commandments, it says, "Do not kill." This means that euthanasia is bad because God has commanded Christians not to kill in any circumstance, even when in a life of pain. Muslims think that euthanasia is good, as they believe they are allowed to end a life if there is a reason. In the Quran it says, "Do not kill unjustly." This means that euthanasia is good because it is ending the pain of someone with a terminal illness, so it is fair. You can see here that we've talked about 2 different religions, and we've clearly stated what the religion is before we start the argument. We've got at the beginning of it, Christians think and Muslims think. We're then saying whether euthanasia is good or bad right at the beginning, so we're going to follow on from whatever we're saying at the start throughout the rest of the paragraph. Our point is clear, and then we go on to our evidence. We're giving reference as to where the evidence comes from and a clear quotation in each case. In the top one we've got in the Bible in the 10 Commandments, and in the bottom one we've got in the Quran. Then all we need is an explanation as to why it means that euthanasia is bad or why it means that euthanasia is good. As long as the explanation matches with the quotation, then it should be clear and we should be getting all the marks. The last one of our key rules that we're going to be looking at is the fact that Christians believe in love your neighbour. This means that Jesus taught people to love everybody and be kind and caring towards everybody all of the time, no matter who they are. I'd like to know how this would affect a Christian's attitude towards global warming. Use the sentence starter. It will make a Christian think that they need to or do not need to reduce global warming because. Pause the video now and use that teaching, love your neighbour, in order to answer the question. It's time for another keywords test. Give a definition of deforestation. Deforestation is the cutting down of large amounts of forest, usually because of business needs. The final topic that we need to look at for this is life after death. The first thing that we need to know is what Christians and Muslims believe about what happens to us when we die. For each thing, I want you to write down 2 bullet points to talk about Judgment Day, heaven and hell, and the idea of nothing. We'll start with Judgment Day. Judgment Day is the idea that everybody is going to be judged according to their deeds. Muslims and Christians both believe in this concept. For Muslims, people will be judged according to their deeds. They must cross a bridge to paradise carrying the book of their sins. If the book is too heavy, then they will fall to hell. Throughout your life for Muslims, angels are writing down all of your good and bad deeds into this book, and it's what God uses to judge you. For Christians, God and Jesus will judge them according to their sins and divide them up into those who deserve heaven and those who deserve hell. They will then be sent to heaven or hell accordingly. In terms of heaven and hell, heaven is seen as a place of paradise where good people will go as a reward. The Quran describes heaven as a place with gardens of everlasting bliss. Hell, on the other hand, is a place where bad people will go, as it is a punishment. The Bible describes hell as a lake of fire and sulphur, somewhere where people are burning all the time. The idea of nothing is an idea that belongs to many people. After we die, there will be nothing. Many people, including atheists, believe that after death, nothing will happen. They say there's no evidence to say that there is a life after this one. They may say that before we were born, we're not conscious and do not exist, and we return to that state after we die. This is difficult for many religious people to accept, as it makes death much more terrifying. But for many atheists, they would say that it just means that you need to live this life to its full, and gives them an incentive to do so. Think about your previous revision and try to give a Muslim and Christian teaching on judgment. For Islam, think about the weighing of deeds. For Christianity, think think about a particular parable that shows how people are judged. Here's what you could have had. In Islam, in the Quran, it says, "Every atom's weight of good shall be rewarded, and every atom's weight of bad shall be punished." It gives us the idea that every single tiny little good thing that you do will be rewarded, whereas every single tiny little bad thing that you do will be punished. That God is absolutely aware of all of your deeds throughout your life, and you'll be judged absolutely accurately according to them. In Christianity, the parable of the sheep and the goats teaches that those who treat people well, for example helping the poor and visiting the sick, will go to heaven, to their eternal reward, and those who do not will go to hell, their eternal doom. In the parable, the sheep are the good people and the goats are the bad people. Jesus is described to divide them into those who are going to go to heaven and hell. And those who have helped people, "I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink," are the sheep who are going to go to heaven. It suggests that the way that we treat people is the most important thing that we do in this life. Time for another keywords test. Define resurrection. This is the belief that everyone will rise from the dead on the day of judgment.
The next thing we need to look at is another rule that you need to be thinking about all the way through this topic. This is the idea that Christians believe that in the Bible it says, "Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air." This means that Christians believe in dominion. They've been given power and control over the earth. They're the people who are in charge, so they can do whatever they want with it. I want to know what their view on animal testing is based on this teaching. So start off your answer by saying this teaching shows that a Christian can or cannot experiment on animals because. Pause the video now in order to answer that question.
The final one of the important rules that we're going to look at is the fact that in the Bible it says, "Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky." This means that Christians believe in the idea of dominion. They have power and control over the earth, and they are in charge so they can do what they want. I want you to use this teaching to tell me what it means that Christians would think about the use of animals for experimentation. Pause the video now and answer that question using dominion as an idea. Finally, for our exam, we need to know specific religious teachings that we're going to be able to use in 4, 5 and 12 mark questions. We're going to look at Islamic teachings first on the topic and then move on to Christian teachings. I want you to write down the 3 teachings that you think that you will remember that are a bit unfamiliar to you. Make sure that you're looking for the ones that are going to be most useful across the most of the topic, because they're going to be the best ones to remember for your exam. First of all, we've got the teaching, "It is Allah who made for you the grazing animals on which you ride, and some of them which you eat." This is a great quotation, as it's showing us that Muslims believe in dominion as well. It means that Allah made animals for us to eat and for transport. We can do as we please with them. The second teaching is from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It says, "All creatures are like a family of God." This means that every creation, including animals, is important to God and should be cared for. Next is a really good one in terms of stewardship. It says, "The earth is green and beautiful, and Allah has appointed you his stewards over it. Whoever plants a tree and diligently looks after it until it matures and bears fruit is rewarded." This means that Allah has created a beautiful word for us to live on. If we protect it and add to it, we will be rewarded by God. The next teaching is really useful in terms of looking at killing people. If you've killed one person, it's as if you've killed the whole of mankind. Any ending of a life should be seen as a huge sin in the eyes of God, and it will be punished by him. Finally, we've got that teaching on judgment. Every atom's weight of good shall be rewarded, and every atom's weight of bad shall be punished. This is from the Quran. This means that Allah will fairly judge everyone on their actions they have committed in life. People will either be rewarded or punished for them. Now do the same for the Christian side. Pick out the 3 teachings that you think that you really need to remember for the topic and make sure that you're learning them. The first one is this: We will make human beings, they will be like us and resemble us. They will have power over the fish, the birds, and all the animals. This means that God has made humans in his image, so they're better than the rest of creation. They have power over nature and can use it however they like. Another teaching you could choose to learn is the earth is the Lord's and everything on it, the world and all who live on it. This means that the world has been created by God and belongs to God. We should look after it on his behalf. It proves that we are stewards over the earth. In the Bible it says, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air. This means that Christians are in charge of the planet and can do whatever they want. They have dominion over it. And finally, God looked at everything he had made and he was very pleased. This means that God meant to create the planet and was pleased with what he saw. It shows us that the planet is of value and something that we should be looking after, including all the animals that live on it. As well as these teachings, don't forget to learn the key rules that we've looked at throughout the slides. They're really important because they can be used across lots of different topics and are essential knowledge for you before you go into your exam. The final thing we need to do is to finish with an exam question. This is a 12-mark exam question, so it's the longest type that we need to be doing. You need to spend around 15 minutes answering this question. And remember, you need to look at both sides of the argument when you're doing a 12-mark evaluation question. The question that we're looking for is we should protect the planet on behalf of God. It's asking if we've got a responsibility to protect the planet or whether we should just leave it up to God or not care about it at all. Remember to use that appeal plus structure in your reasons. Try to give multiple pieces of evidence to explain why each one of your points is valid and make sure that you're linking back to the statement. Does it argue that we should be protecting the planet on behalf of God, or does it argue on the other side that God can protect it for himself, or that we just shouldn't be protecting the planet? Remember, with a 12-mark question, being as clear as possible is the key. Where you can give evidence, make sure that you're giving religious evidence. It could be teachings or examples. Where you're struggling to do it, try to give simple points that are well explained, because they can get marks too. Pause the video and give yourself 15 minutes to answer the question. Here are 2 model paragraphs that you may have had similar ideas to in your own answer. Just notice the structure that's being used and the type of language that's used throughout. Also notice the fact that there's clear links back to the question and that every quotation within it has been explained. The most obvious argument is to agree with the statement because Christians believe that God has provided them the duty of looking after the planet. One of the key rules is that they believe in stewardship, which suggests that Christians believe that the world has been created for us by God, and we have the responsibility to take care of it, to show respect for a world created by God. This idea of looking after the planet is further emphasised in Islam. In the Hadith it says, "The earth is green and beautiful, and Allah has appointed you his stewards over it." This illustrates the idea that Allah has created a beautiful world for humans to live on, and that God has commanded them to look after the planet and maintain its beauty. Therefore, this shows that we should look after the planet on behalf of God, as he has instructed us both in the Bible and the Quran. Nonetheless, some Christians may disagree, as God has given humans dominion over the earth, where he created all living things and put humans in charge. In the Bible it says, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. This means that they have power over creation and can use it however they please. Similarly, in the Quran, it says it is Allah who has made for you the grazing animals on which you ride, and some of them you eat. This demonstrates that Allah has permitted humans to use the planet and everything on it to their own benefit. Therefore, this shows that we do not have to look after the planet on behalf of God, as he has allowed humans to do whatever they please with it, if it benefits them and their survival.